Today, we have a teacher who destroys an entitled parent who thinks their son deserves an A, even though he refused to study. The teacher and this Karen actually almost get into a big fight, and it's really intense, and I know you'll enjoy it, so let's go. So we're going to call the subscriber who submitted this story Carl. So anyways, let's talk about a kid in Carl's class, who's the kid who ends up causing this whole big story to unfold. Anyways, so there's a kid in Carl's class who we're going to call the spoiled kid. So anyways, right, this kid, the spoiled kid, he kind of knew that he was set no matter what. Because the thing is, right, they were in junior year, and if you don't know, junior year and senior year, grades are fairly important when it comes to the college application process. So most of the kids there were getting kind of stressed out about that whole thing. However, the spoiled kid simply couldn't care less. Basically, he knew that he was going to get a guaranteed spot at his family's company no matter what happened. So he kind of thought to himself, why would I even try? Why would I honestly even bother to go above and beyond? Why would I try to get into a good college or just try to get into college at all if I know that I'm going to get a guaranteed spot at at my dad's company? I know my mom wants me to do it, but I just really don't think I'm going to care about school. So anyways, Carl tells me that this kid really just neglects school, honestly. He kind of lets it fall to the side. He doesn't never show up to class, but as the time goes on, he shows up less and less. I've said this before, kind of a big difference from not showing up to class in college, if any of you guys are college students. Just think back to high school. It was a big deal in high school if you didn't show up. So this kid was really, really going above and beyond to show that he did not care about this class. So anyways, there was a pretty big test coming up in this class. There was a pretty big test. And, the teacher was kind of being all right, guys, well, I just want to give you a heads up. This test is in 2 weeks. I know a lot of you guys aren't going to start studying now, but I just want to let you know it's coming. It's on the horizon. Then a week later, the teacher's like, all right, guys, just so you know, test is next Friday, so you might not start studying this weekend, but maybe you should because I don't know, man. It's a big test. And so basically the teacher was preparing them that something pretty big was coming up. And the day before the test, the spoiled kid actually shows up to class because he doesn't drop out of this class entirely. He still shows up every once in a blue moon, he'll appear, right? So sure enough, he appears the day before the big test. And the teacher is writing stuff on the board of basically exam review of what will be covered on the test, what they should expect to see tomorrow. And the spoiled kid turns over and looks at Carl, and Carl looks back at the spoiled kid. The spoiled kid's like, dude, what? We have an exam? And Carl just looks at this kid and is like, yes, we do have an exam. And the kid's like, dude, what? The professor didn't say anything about it. And Carl just kind of looks at this kid because, no, in fact, the professor did say something about it. The teacher had been speaking about it for the last 2 weeks, giving ample warning to anyone who showed up to class. The only thing was that the spoiled kid did not show up to class. So the spoiled kid's like, dude, this is such BS. They can't be pulling this on us. And Carl's kind of looking at the spoiled kid like, bro, I don't know who you're saying when you're saying us, but I know for a fact you're not saying us, like you and me, us. You're saying us like the singular you, bro. I'm not part of this. So sure enough, the spoiled kid, instead of studying, instead of being okay, I got to pull myself together and just kind of grinding it out that night, getting whatever sleep he can, the spoiled kid thinks it is so unfair that he wasn't told about this, which he would have been told if he did what he was supposed to do, which it was mandatory to show up to class. I guess the teacher just didn't really care in the sense that I think the teachers at this high school, Carl says they were supposed to inform the front office if a student doesn't show up. It's a big deal if kids don't show up to class, right? I think this teacher is just well, I mean, you're going to take an L in the grade anyways, so I just don't feel like going through all the paperwork. So anyways, the day of the exam happens, and they walk in. And Carl watches as the spoiled kid walks in. You can just tell, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but some people just walk into in an exam and you just know they're not going to do good. You just know you can just see it on their face. They're kind of, they're sweating bricks, right? Sweating buckets right now. Sweating bricks. What am I saying? Yeah, but anyways, you already knew that they weren't going to do that well. And yeah, Carl saw this kid. He walked in. And so the teacher walked around, handed out the exams. And Carl was going through it. It actually wasn't as bad as he thought, which you always love to see that, right? I had a computer science exam this morning, and I was sure that I was going to do terrible, but it just happened that everything that I studied was everything on the test. In my experience, it's always been whatever I study is never on the exam, and it's always that one thing that you're like, I don't need to cover this. That is like the main thing on the exam, but somehow it's literally the roles reversed for me this morning. I thought I was screwed and I studied certain things, and those certain things were literally it for the exam. Like, I am blessed up today. Got to keep that lucky streak going. But sure enough, right, Carl does pretty well, and he's kind of breezing through the questions, and he looks over at the spoiled kid. And the spoiled kid is kind of like leafing through he's leafing through the test, but instead of leafing through the test to read the questions or fill in ones quickly that like a fairly good test-taking strategy is to really quickly go through your exam and fill in any bubbles that you already know how to do. That's actually what I did this morning. I didn't need the extra time, but it's just a good practice to go about. You'll be a little bit more efficient, and you'll also be able to structure your time during that exam just so you can get as many questions done in the allotted time. Anyways, though, but the thing is, that kid was not going through the exam, leafing through it because of that reason. This kid was frantically leafing through the exam to look for a single question that he could understand. But here's the thing, man. When you don't show up to class for weeks on end and all the material is taught in class, and I can only assume that this kid was not studying outside of class, right? I can only assume that that was the case. So yeah, sure enough, this kid does not do well. Eventually, Carl, I forgot his name. Carl gets up, finishes his exam, and he does pretty good. Yeah, so basically when you don't study for an exam and you never show up to the class, you don't do well. Carl did pretty well, but let's just say that, in a couple days, the teacher got all the the tests graded and handed them back. And here's the thing. If a teacher hands most people's tests back face up, and they got little red smiley faces on them, or they're just face up, right? And the teacher comes over to you, and he just looks you in the eye, and he kind of like looks away from you as he hands you your paper, and your paper is upside down. And even though your paper is upside down, you can see all the red ink bleeding through the paper, all the X's, and you just know it's bad news. So sure enough, right, the spoiled kid got his test handed back face down very quickly. The spoiled kid flips it over and is just staring at the grade. So in previous stories I've received, sometimes spoiled kids will stand up and be like, this is outrageous, like I deserve an A because, I don't know, I showed up. I don't know. But in this case, I think the spoiled kid kind of understood that, it was kind of a consequences of his actions type situation over here. And in this story, it actually turns out it's the entitled mother/Karen that is the true issue. So anyways, so the kids take their grades home or whatever, and, sorry, I forgot the names. Carl, his mom's very proud of him, whatever, right? But I guess spoiled kid's mom was not very happy, because the next day in class is very, very, very interesting. Because, the spoiled kid doesn't appear right away, and that's not the interesting part, because Carl's not surprised if the spoiled kid doesn't show up to class. I mean, that's kind of just a usual at this point. However, the spoiled kid did show up to class. He showed up to class a little bit late, because he was not the only one to show up. His entitled mother, who we're just going to call the Karen, because it's shorter than entitled mother, and she is a Karen, so it's still accurate, right? The Karen, his Karen mother showed up. And she opens up the door. She's got the aviator sunglasses on. She's got the Karen haircut. Like, this is just standard Karen behavior right here. Like, this is textbook Karen. So sure enough, the Karen mother is like, excuse me, we need to talk. And the teacher is like, oh, hello, Miss Adams. I don't know, say that's her name. Hello, Miss Adams. Would you like to discuss your son's recent score? And this is kind of awkward because this wasn't like before class or after class or when people were moving in or out. This was in the middle of the teacher, right, teaching the class. This was in the middle of people sitting down trying to pay attention, and all of a sudden, this mom bursts in and demands to speak to the teacher about her son's test results, which probably imply that he just didn't do that well, one might say, right? So you could, like, the thing is, Carl is really curious to see if the spoiled kid is, like, you know, what his reaction is. And there have been times in previous stories where the spoiled kid was almost like rooting on his own mother. It's almost as if, like, the spoiled kid brought his mother to, like, speak on his behalf and get him what he wants, right? But in this case, I think the spoiled kid was a little bit less delusional than other spoiled kids I've covered, because this kid is just like, he's trying to shrink away. He doesn't want to be there because, man, I can only imagine how embarrassing this really is, right? But the spoiled kid, he's almost in more pain than the students, like just sitting in this cringy, awkward situation. So the Karen mother is like, yes, I would like to talk about his test scores. And the teacher's like, well, can we do that after class? You know, I'm a little busy right here. And she's like, no, this is a number one priority. I don't care how busy you are. All that goes off the table because you need to listen to me, mister. And you could already tell by the way that she had this tone that it was not about to be a pleasant interaction in any way, right? It was not about to be a nice interaction for any of them. It was about to be one of those standard Karen interactions that just make you think to yourself, man, what about a world without Karens? And real quick, comment Karen down below if you made it this far. Unless you're listening on Spotify, but I think you can comment on Spotify. By the way, did you know that you can listen to these stories on Spotify too? I've just enabled monetization on Spotify, so you'll actually be helping me out there as well. So I'd appreciate it if you listened on there too and gave me 5 stars. It's in the description. Anyways, let's get back to it. So yeah, sure enough, the Karen mother starts to almost stomp her feet a little bit. Like, you need to listen to me. My son tried really hard and he should get an A+ for trying, which, look, I think trying is really important. I think you should get credit for effort. However, look, you can't only get credit for effort in stuff like this. It can't always be the case that if you quote unquote try, you'll get 100%. Not for everything, man. And also the more important thing here, even if you disagree with me on that, is that he didn't try. So the teacher tries to go on to explain, to be like, well, Miss Adams, the truth is your son doesn't show up to class ever. Like, he showed up 7 times this year. He barely knew that there was a test coming up, and all the material was covered pretty in depth in class. That's why, the median score was an 85 or something. However, your son's score, I'm sure you know what it is. And she's like, say it out loud. And her son, the spoiled kid, is like, Mom, why? I think that, I honestly am trying to figure out, why the Karen wants to do that. Honestly, I think probably that Karen was all just I want them to know how low the score is, so they think it's ridiculous too. But in fact, she's really just exposing, how bad her son did. So the teacher's like, yeah, your son got a 28%. And, the whole class just, was like, huh? A 28%? And look, okay, there are some classes that getting a 28% is not, impossible, right? But this was not one of those classes. I've definitely seen, physics final exams where the lowest score is, a 2. Rest in peace, man. But I've seen that stuff happen, right? But this was not one of those classes where it was even feasibly possible to get a 28. But somehow the spoiled kid managed to muster himself a 28. So everyone in the class was like, dude, what? And so the Karen mom's like, oh, well, you know that's ridiculous. And, the teacher's like, I'm sorry, I followed the rubric. He just answered literally everything wrong. I gave him as many points as possible, but I just couldn't help him. The answers he was giving to the questions weren't even related to anything we've ever done. They just weren't even close. I tried. So basically the teacher was explaining that he actually tried. He gave, the spoiled kid the benefit of the doubt with this stuff, right? He really gave the spoiled kid the most possible points, which honestly just embarrassed the spoiled kid more because now everyone in the class knows that not only did he get a 28, but he was he was generously given a 28. Like, that was the teacher looking deep into their heart to give the best possible score they could. So at this point, the Karen's like, this isn't the end of this. And she storms off and like drags her son behind her. So which that's like probably, I bet the spoiled kid probably would have walked out with her anyways. Because honestly, dude, just imagine being the spoiled kid. And your mom just exposes you in front of the entire class. Are you really going to want to walk down a big walk of shame all the way down to your seat just to enter in probably one of the most awkward like classes of your life? I mean, it's going to be one of 3 classes you've taken with this professor at this point because you never show up. But I don't blame the spoiled kid for dipping. However, this does not end yet because, the bell rings and, the kids are walking off to class. And the thing is, the high school that they go to is like there's multiple buildings and they're not all connected by hallways. So what Carl and one of his other friends in the class, they had another class together. So Carl walked out of his class and you had to walk through or you walked by the faculty parking lot, and their teacher in the class with the spoiled kid that they just came from had like a very distinct like red car. And Carl was walking by and he sees a very obvious big keystroke. Oh, what's it called? Like when you key when you key someone's card. So basically, what that means, if you guys don't know, is you take car keys and you just it's gonna make it gross. I don't even want to think about the sound, but you basically scrape up their car and it does a lot of damage. I mean, it doesn't like total it or anything ridiculous, but it's still pretty annoying to deal with. So it's not something you want to do. So sure enough, Carl sees this and he decides, okay, I should probably tell someone about this. Like, this obviously didn't just looks pretty intentional, maybe even a bit fresh too. So he kind of turns around and there was a teacher pretty close. So that, kind of just informs the teacher what's going on. Eventually, who's his name? Carl's teacher comes out, looks at his car. It's like, oh, like what kid did this, whatever. And when there was like a bunch of faculty or whatever all out there, and they're trying to figure out who did it. And, Carl is staying behind trying to say what he saw. That's when the Karen, no longer with the spoiled kid. I think the spoiled kid literally fled the premises. I think he just was like, dude, I can't be here anymore. I just simply can't show my face right now. I just can't do it. So sure enough, right, the Karen walks out and she has her hands on her hips. And in one of her hands is kind of dangling, and she kind of like flicks it around a little bit, so it makes a little like dingling noise, like a little chain type sound. It was a pair of car keys with a nice little coating of fresh paint on the end of it. And she's like, well, look how karma strikes. And one of the administrators, not even the teacher whose car it was like, ma'am, did you do this? And she's like, well, I might have. But just so you know, if I did, wink, wink, like it's totally justified. And they're like, ma'am, you do know that like all areas of the school are under they're under camera supervision. They're all recorded at all times. Like, if you really did just commit a crime like that, we have that on camera. And this is when she's like, well, you should have known the context. You don't understand. This teacher over here decided to fail my son. Decided to fail my son because he's elitist. He hates the fact that, his student comes from a rich background. And at this point, everyone was just like, dude, what? Like, it was just so confusing. I think the Karen's brain was malfunctioning a little bit more than normal, because I think the Karen just didn't expect that she was about to get caught, like, committing a crime, right? Because, like, the whole fact that the whole place was, like, was recorded was, I guess the Karen didn't see that coming. So she tried to come up with, like, a knee-jerk, like, reaction, like, you hate my son because he's rich. It's like, dude, no, first of all, doesn't hate him. Second of all, he got a bad score because he didn't show up or try. Like, how hard is it for you to understand, Miss Karen? However, the Karen doesn't end there. Because Karens, one thing that you'll learn Karens hate being defeated. That's one of the worst possible things that can happen. Karens simply can't accept defeat. That's one thing you'll learn. So the Karen starts huffing and puffing and starts walking up to the teacher like, you, change my son's grade right now. Do it. And she starts like walking up to the teacher, and the teacher's just looking at her like, what? Huh? Like, dude, what? And yeah, and so sure enough, he's like, blah, 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 like, you better change my son's grade right now. I'm giving you to a count of 7. Which, like, first of all, bro, countdowns stopped working when you're older than 5. The countdowns stop working. Yes, if like some mom says to her son, well, you better stop doing that. I'm going to give you a count of 3. You know, the son's like, oh my God, like the world must end if the countdown goes. But after the age of 5, you know, countdowns don't work that well. Also, a countdown of 7, bro, what? Like, why? It's unnaturally long. It's like 7, 6. It's we got the point when you said 6, dude. Like, okay, chill out. So the Karen is just like yelling numbers at this teacher. Carl's is standing there really awkwardly, just thinking like, kind of turns to his friends like, dude, do we go? Like, do we still have to be here? Are we at like risk of like, I don't know, like a Karen attack malfunction comes and hits us in the face by accident? Like, I really don't know at this point. So sure enough, they're just standing there. And that's when the Karen, I think, just realizes that she lost the argument, which I told you guys earlier, Karens can't concede losses. So the Karen's like, no, I don't concede. Like you won't pay for it. And she like, dude, she's like, I don't know if she got like possessed by a football player. She goes in for the slide tackle. And let me just say that, no offense, but the Karen's low-key built like a train. So like the teacher was also like kind of a small, skinny guy in his 30s. Like this teacher would have absolutely destroyed, or not this teacher, this Karen would have absolutely wrecked him. However, the Karen, when she was running it, I don't know why she was running in, dude. Don't ask me. This is just Karen behavior. The Karen was running in full steam ahead, charging towards him. However, she misses, trips in the dirt, and literally there's like a little hill, dude. She trips and rolls down the hill. And everyone's just standing there looking at her. She's not even done at the bottom of the hill, dude. She's thrashing her fists, screaming, doing very typical Karen activities. And at that point, that's when Carl decided that he's seen enough, and that's enough for him. And that was his cue to leave. Click on the video on screen right now. I know you'll enjoy it.